Good afternoon. Our hearing, Using the Web as a Weapon, the Internet as a Tool for Violent Radicalization and Homegrown Terrorism, will come to order. Last month, the New York Times introduced the world to Samir Khan, a 21-year-old American living at his parents' house in North Carolina. Khan has been operating one of the most active English-language websites on the planet, one that promotes a radicalized view of Islam and violence against Americans here at home. It hosts hundreds of links to videos showing American soldiers being killed by Iraqi insurgents, including a file called The United States of Losers, which showcases a recent news broadcast about a firefight in Afghanistan. Khan's commentary on the site reads, quote, "You can even see an American soldier hiding during the ambush like a baby. Allahu Akbar, unquote." Khan's is not an isolated case. This past August, Ahmed Mohammed and Yosef Magahed, 21-year-old University of South Florida engineering students, were stopped for speeding in Goose Creek, South Carolina. The stop resulted in a 2-count federal indictment on terrorism-related charges. When questioned by federal agents, Mohammed admitted to using the Internet to post a 12-minute YouTube video demonstrating in Arabic how to turn a toy boat into a bomb. He told the FBI that he made the video to teach, quote, "those persons in Arabic countries to defend themselves against the infidels invading their countries," unquote. And in March of this year, Hassan Abu Jihad, a.k.a. Paul Hall, was arrested in Phoenix, Arizona, on charges that he supported terrorism by disclosing secret information about the location of Navy ships and the best ways to attack them. The investigation of Abu Jihad, a former U.S. Navy sailor, began with an Internet service provider in Connecticut. Abu Jihad is believed to have exchanged emails and information with a British computer specialist arrested in Great Britain in 2004 for running terror financing websites. In September of last year, Adam Gadon, the son of Jewish parents from Southern California, who himself converted to Islam and went on to become Osama bin Laden's spokesman, released a 45-minute video on the Internet called An Invitation to Islam. In that video, Gadon talks about al-Qaeda's ideology, rationale, and motivations, encouraging Americans to sympathize with the group. There can be no doubt the Internet is increasingly being used as a tool to teach and radicalize Americans and legal residents. These people no longer need to travel to foreign countries or isolated backwoods compounds to become indoctrinated by extremists and to learn how to kill neighbors in our communities. On the contrary, the Internet allows them to share violent goals and plot from the comfort of their living rooms. A problem with the President's own recently released National Strategy for Homeland Security tells us is here and is not going away. How we address violent radicalization while respecting the Constitution in the process is not easy. There is no magic pill or rule book or law that will fix this, but there are steps to take. Representative Reichert and I are co-authors of H.R. 1955, the Violent Radicalization and Homegrown Terrorism Prevention Act of 2007, which passed the House 404-6, a near miracle, several weeks ago. The centerpiece of H.R. 1955 is the creation of a national commission to study violent radicalization, to determine the best way forward, and to make concrete proposals for action. At 6 months intervals over 18 months, this commission would drill down on the issue and propose to both Congress and the Secretary of Homeland Security initiatives to intercede before radicalized individuals turn violent. We are not afraid of where the facts will take us, but no one on the Hill or elsewhere should think we already have a complete understanding of how someone with radical beliefs which are protected by our Constitution, becomes a violent killer. actions which are not protected, in fact, which are condemned by our laws and which are felonies. Many in the Senate likewise support our call for a national commission. My colleague and friend Susan Collins of Maine recently introduced companion legislation that would make the commission a reality. I look forward to working with the Senate to get a bill to the President's desk before the end of this session. I welcome our witnesses today who will tell us about the Internet and how it is a tool to violent radicalization and how it is abused, I would say abused, by those who would call others to commit violent acts. I believe our witnesses' remarks will be a valuable starting point for the National Commission's work. Appreciate the fact that you have come here today, and now would yield 5 minutes to the ranking member for any opening remarks he wishes to make.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and also thank you for holding this hearing. And so I was listening to your opening statement. I too have an opening statement, but I am a storyteller, and I like to just think about, part of our statement here today is how much the world has changed with the Internet giving us global access and communications, really, for that matter. And one of the stories that I like to share, even just going back as not too far back in history into the late 90s when I was the sheriff, and we had a problem with WTO in Seattle. And part of my response to that was to be on the streets with the troops downtown during that disturbance. And shortly thereafter, a Tacoma police officer took a trip to India. And while he was in the high mountains of India, retracing his family roots, he came across the village where his family began years and years and years before. And as he was speaking with these high mountain people in this small community, he told them that he was from Seattle, Washington, the United States of America, in Seattle. And they said, they got very excited and wide-eyed, and they said, and he also told them that he was a police officer from Tacoma. And they really got excited, and he said, do you work for the great sheriff of Seattle? Now, he was very surprised and said, now, how in the world would you know about the sheriff in Seattle? Well, during WTO, I ran down the street. I chased a crook that was ripping off a Radio Shack store in Seattle, and they happened to have one TV and one satellite dish. And so the village was surrounded around this TV watching WTO in Seattle, and the one sheriff running down the street chasing after a crook. So after that little story, and after he told a little white lie and said that he did work for the great sheriff of Seattle, the red carpet was rolled out for him. But what an example of how small this world has become. And when you talk about the way that we communicate now and how fast information moves, and now we're moving not only from satellite TV into a small village in India, but we're talking about the Internet and how you can begin to change minds. Internet is good in some respects, but unfortunately the Internet also facilitates terrorist communications, provides an additional venue of terrorists to spread their hateful and murderous propaganda. The Internet communications established by these terrorists and would-be terrorists serves as a virtual society where otherwise alienated and isolated individuals can meet for training, reinforcement, and social networking. Powerful, commercially available encryption and communication tools make these societies hard to penetrate. A recent report from George Washington University and the University of Virginia found that Internet has made a range of terrorist operational activities cheaper, faster, and more secure, including communications, propaganda, radicalization, and recruitment. The New York City Police Department found that the Internet is the driver and enabler for the process of radicalization. Similarly, the United States Institute of Peace noted that, quote, the great virtues of the Internet, ease of access, lack of regulation, vast potential audiences, and fast flow of information, among others, have been turned to the advantage of groups committed to terrorizing our communities to achieve their goals. The problem of the Internet radicalization is fairly well documented by these and other studies. But the question remains, what can be done about it? What can we do now? How can we protect ourselves without harming the rights of law-abiding citizens and without doing damage to the free flow of information on the internet that is now vital to our economy in this information age. This subcommittee has produced legislation by myself and Chairwoman Harman, which she mentioned, establishing a commission on radicalization to help establish a national strategy to combat terrorism. While this certainly is a good first step, there may be additional interim steps that we can take in the meantime. And according to the Middle East Media Research Institute, most Islamic websites are hosted on servers based in the West, taking advantage of the very same freedoms they wish to destroy. It is also true, however, that many of the Western Internet service providers hosting these sites may be unaware that they are facilitating terrorism. So it seems to me that maybe a first step to any Internet counter-radicalization strategy would be to ask responsible Internet service providers to police themselves and voluntarily shut down sites that sponsor terrorist propaganda. We hope to hear from our witnesses today about their ideas on how we can encounter Internet radicalization, counter Internet radicalization, reduce its spread, and begin to win the war of ideas against those who seek to destroy our culture and our freedoms. And I yield back my time.
I thank the ranking member and now welcome the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Thompson of Mississippi, and yield to him for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and I compliment you for having this hearing. As you know, based on the work we've done the last couple of weeks, it appears that we'll do more in this area. Today we turn to a very serious concern, the use of the Internet to promote extremist violence. The Internet has drastically increased the ability of terrorists to reach a global audience, an audience they want to indoctrinate. And the terrorists are doing so with impunity. Unlike other pathways into the country, the Internet is not restricted by border enforcement or protected by TSA, and its users can remain anonymous. It allows users to connect with like-minded individuals, resulting in a sense of closeness and community that transcends race, gender, age, and physical location. Indeed, the Internet provides users with a sense of belonging, a perfect vehicle for Al-Qaeda and others to recruit people on the fringes, and it's happening. Daniel Saunier, a 22-year-old troubled Canadian, stated, "The first time I saw an Al-Qaeda video on the Internet, I was ready to go. I wanted to kill the disbelievers." According to one friend, Saunier became so extreme, he once said he would go to war against his own father. Friends started calling him Osama bin Daniel. What's so troubling about Mr. Saunier is that, by all accounts, he was an average 22-year-old until he was indoctrinated by extremists that found him on the Internet. Mr. Saunier lives in Canada, but Samir Khan, a 21-year-old American, operates an extremist website out of the comfort of his parents' home in North Carolina. It is one of the most frequently visited English language websites in the world that preaches a radicalized view of Islam and promotes violence. What makes the means of communication so appealing to terrorist organizations is that new converts don't need a plane ticket to arrange a meeting. Instead, videos, blogs, chat rooms, and message boards expose new recruits to a romanticized view of jihad with a few keyboard strokes. I want to congratulate the chair and ranking member of this subcommittee for authorizing the bill that overwhelmingly passed the House last month. It forces us to take this threat and come up with strategies to counter it that not only protect our people, but also their constitutional rights. I look forward to this hearing today and its testimony. I expect it will be a useful starting point for us to develop strategies to thwart homegrown terrorism. Welcome to you all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Other members of the subcommittee are reminded that under committee rules, opening statements may be submitted for the record. I welcome our panel of witnesses. Our first witness, Dr. Bruce Hoffman, is well known to me and has advised me over the years on various issues involving terrorism. In fact, he has been studying terrorism himself for 30 years. Should have been enough time to solve this problem, Bruce. He is currently a tenured professor in the Security Studies program at Georgetown University's Edmund A. Walsh School of Foreign Service. He previously held the corporate chair in counterterrorism and counterinsurgency at the RAND Corporation, which is where I met him, and was also director of RAND's Washington, D.C. office. He holds degrees in government, history, and international relations, and received his doctorate from Oxford. Dr. Hoffman is the author of the book, Inside Terrorism. Our second witness, Rita Katz, is the director of the Search for International Terrorist Entities Institute, or SITE for short. She has studied, tracked, and analyzed international terrorists and their financial operations for many years. Since well before September 11, she has personally briefed government officials, including former terrorism czar Richard Clarke and his staff in the White House, as well as investigators with the Department of Justice, Department of Treasury, and Department of Homeland Security on the financing and recruitment of networks of the terrorist movement. She's the author of Terrorist Hunter. I'm outing her because the author of this book is called Anonymous. Terrorist Hunter, the extraordinary story of a woman who went undercover to infiltrate the radical Islamic groups operating in America. And following her testimony, in fact, following the testimony of all of our witnesses, we will show a short video that she has assembled that includes some of the information that's on these sites. I thought that would be useful for our members and also for the audience that's physically here or watching on television. And let me say, parental discretion advised. Our third witness, Perry Aftab, is an Internet attorney and was one of the first lawyers to practice Internet law shortly after the creation of the World Wide Web. Ms. Aftab founded America Online's Legal Discussions, as well as the Court TV Law Center's Legal Helpline, providing legal information and education to thousands of lawyers and consumers worldwide. Ms. Aftab previously served as head of the U.S. National Action Committee for UNESCO's Internet Safety Project and the Worldwide Internet Society Societal Steering Committee. Her book for parents about online safety has been adapted for worldwide use and has been translated into several languages. She's also worked with law enforcement agencies worldwide in the areas of cybercrime prevention, cyber terrorism, law enforcement, and security matters. Our fourth and final witness, Mark Weitzman, is the director of the Task Force Against Hate and Terrorism with the Simon Wiesenthal Center and the chief representative of the Center to the United Nations in New York. Mr. Weitzman was also the founding director of the center's New York Tolerance Center, and as a recognized expert in the fields of extremism and cyber hate, he has lectured and worked with various groups ranging from Congress, the UN, the EU, and the U.S. Embassy in Berlin to the U.S. Army and the FBI. He has also chaired the Working Group on Internet and Media Issues at the Global Forum on Anti-Semitism that was convened by the Israeli government in February 2007. The task force coordinates the center's research and activities on extremism, intergroup relations, the Internet, and hate crimes. Without objection, the witnesses' full statements will be inserted in the record, and I would ask each of you to summarize your statement in 5 minutes or less. There is a clock that I am quite certain is visible to you, and it will start blinking as you near the end of your 5 minutes. We'll start with Dr. Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee, for the opportunity to testify before you on this important issue today. Terrorism has long been understood to be a violent means of communication. The terrorist act itself is thus deliberately designed to attract attention and then, through the publicity that it generates, to communicate a message. But communication is essential for a terrorist movement, not just to summon publicity and attention, but also to promote its longevity and ensure its very survival. Without an effective communication strategy, a terrorist movement would be unable to assure a continued flow of new recruits into its ranks, motivate and inspire existing members, as well as expand the pool of active supporters and passive sympathizers from which terrorism also draws its sustenance. Given this constellation of requisite sustainable resources, it is not surprising that terrorists today devote so much time and energy to their communications, that they have fastened on the Internet as an especially efficacious vehicle for this purpose, given its fundamental characteristics of rapidity, ubiquity, and cost-effectiveness, is not surprising either. Today, virtually every terrorist group in the world has its own Internet website, and in many instances maintain multiple sites in different languages with different messages tailored to specific audiences. Accordingly, today there are in excess of some 5,000 terrorist and insurgent Internet sites worldwide. The ability to communicate in real time via the Internet has enabled terrorists to reach a potentially vast audience faster, more pervasively, and more effectively than ever before. The implications of this development have been enormous. The Internet, once seen as an engine of education and enlightenment, has instead become an immensely useful vehicle for terrorists to peddle their baseless propaganda and manifold conspiracy theories, as well as summon their would-be and actual followers to violence. These sites alarmingly present an increasingly compelling and indeed accepted alternative point of view, a parallel reality that is presented to the terrorists' variegated audiences. Indeed, the Internet's power to radicalize, to motivate, inspire, animate, and impel radicals to violence has already been repeatedly demonstrated in the United States, Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. The process of radicalization, abetted, facilitated, and encouraged by the Internet, however, is only one side of a coin that critically also involves terrorism subversion. Consider what we have learned about the foiled August 2006 plot to simultaneously bomb 10 U.S. airliners and crash them into targets over American cities. This plot was derailed after arrests in Pakistan once more led U.S. and U.K. officials to yet another terrorist cell of British Muslims of Pakistani heritage. The operations controller was none other than Abu Ubaid al-Masri, the commander for al-Qaeda in Kunar province, Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda may thus be compared to the archetypal shark in the water that must constantly keep moving forward, no matter how slowly or incrementally or die. In Al-Qaeda's context, this means adapting and adjusting to even our most consequential countermeasures, while simultaneously searching to identify new targets and new vulnerabilities and continuing to replenish its ranks with new recruits as well as sympathizers and supporters. In sum, Al-Qaeda's capacity to continue to prosecute this struggle is a direct reflection of both the movement's resiliency and the continued resonance of its ideology and the effectiveness of its communications. Today, Washington has no such program in the war on terrorism to counter effectively these communications and propaganda. America's counterterrorism strategy continues to assume that America's enemies, be they al-Qaeda or the insurgents in Iraq, have a traditional center of gravity. It also assumes that these enemies simply need to be killed or imprisoned so that global terrorism or the Iraqi insurgency will both end. Accordingly, the attention of the U.S. military and intelligence community is directed almost uniformly towards hunting down militant leaders or protecting U.S. forces, not toward understanding the enemy we now face. This is a monumental failing, not only because decapitation strategies have rarely worked in countering mass mobilization, terrorist or insurgent campaigns, but also because al-Qaeda's ability to continue this struggle is ineluctably predicted on its ability to attract new recruits and replenish its resources. The success of U.S. strategy will therefore ultimately depend on our ability to counter al-Qaeda's ideological appeal and thus address the three key elements of al-Qaeda's strategy: the continued resonance of their message, their continued ability to attract recruits to replenish their ranks, and their stubborn capacity for continual regeneration and renewal. To do so, we first need to better understand the mindset and minutiae of the al-Qaeda movement, the animosity and the arguments that underpin it, and indeed the regions of the world from which its struggle emanated and upon which its hungry gaze still rests. Without knowing our enemy, we cannot successfully penetrate their cells. We cannot knowledgeably sow discord and dissension in their ranks and thus weaken them from within. We cannot effectively counter their propaganda and messages of hate and their clarion calls to violence. And we cannot fulfill the most basic requirements of an effective counterterrorism strategy, preempting and preventing terrorist operations and deterring their attacks.
Dr. Hoffman, can you summarize?
I have one paragraph left, so perfect. Until we recognize the importance of this vital prerequisite, America will remain perennially on the defensive, inherently reactive rather than proactive, deprived of the capacity to recognize, much less anticipate, important changes in our enemy's modus operandi, recruitment, and targeting.
Thank you very much. Ms. Katz, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to all the members of this committee for allowing me to offer some of my analysis in studying the Internet jihadi community. Since the war on terror began after 9/11, the United States and the West have embarked a campaign against al-Qaeda. Yet, anyone who reads the front page of a newspaper today can see that al-Qaeda and other jihadist groups are far from defeated, and occasionally people from our own society are arrested for plotting to carry out domestic attacks. Despite being isolated and hunted, the leaders of the jihadi groups nevertheless maintain an active dialogue with their followers, issuing statements through the internet to a worldwide audience. Jihadists continue to hold al-Qaeda in the highest esteem, with localized terrorist groups in Iraq, Egypt, Algeria, Somalia, Libya, and elsewhere pledging their allegiance to bin Laden and his organization. Post 9/11, terrorist bombings in Madrid, London, Bali, Istanbul, and elsewhere demonstrate that the war on terror is not won. It seems, though, as a never-ending series of terrorist plots and training camps are constantly being broken up across the world, from China to Canada. The paradox is plain. Despite very real and significant success dismantling and disrupting terrorists and their supporters, the terrorist threat remains and does not appear to be shrinking. Jihadist networks have evolved to a point where no gun, bomb, or assassination can harm them permanently. One of the primary sources of jihadist resilience is the internet. It is the internet that enables jihadist networks to continue to exist despite the almost unlimited resources that the United States has dedicated to the war on terror. Though guns, IEDs, and other weapons are necessary for terrorists to remain dangerous, the internet is what enables them to coordinate, share information, recruit new members, and propagate their ideology. If we do not treat the internet as a crucial battleground in the war on terror, we will not be able to defeat the jihadist threat. The virtual jihadi network has replaced al-Qaeda training camps. As someone who lives within the jihadi community and spent most of my day with a jihadist, I must say that it is easy for me to understand how, for a jihadist, it is one of the most addictive, interactive, and informative experiences that fulfills the social needs of each and every one of them. From video games, to making bombs, to religious justifications, to friendships, each jihadi feels as he just part of a greater connected community. This overwhelming and gratifying experience for the jihadist explains why members of these online forums are suddenly announced as being dead as a result of carrying out a suicide operation in Iraq, Afghanistan, or elsewhere. The joy and the pleasure the online jihadists share in celebrating such a death is stunning. Though the online jihadist network has benefited the global jihadist movement, at the same time it has provided us with an open window into the means and methods by which jihadi groups operate today. By studying the various dimensions of the virtual jihadist network and then infiltrating them, we can learn about our enemy, including their mindset, who they are, their location, their ideology, trends, and tactics. Understanding our enemy will help us to counter their propaganda, predict types of future attacks, find them, and defend ourselves against their methods. In my submitted statement, I outlined in detail how the online jihadi movement is currently structured, including how jihadist groups are organized online, how information is being disseminated, how new members are being recruited, and how the jihadist groups like Al-Qaeda communicate among themselves and with their followers all through the internet. As long as the internet remains a safe haven for jihadists, uncontested by the law enforcement agencies, the jihadist movement will continue to grow even after its leaders are killed. The challenge is to infiltrate and erode this virtual network. Studying the online jihadi community empowers us. We can listen to what they say, understand the way they think. We can better defend ourselves. SITE has repeatedly implemented such techniques and was able to provide intelligence agencies with information that led to apprehension of would-be terrorist and suicide bombers. In closing, I hope that you all recognize the importance of the internet, and that's why we are here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that fascinating testimony and for the video that we will see in a few minutes. I now recognize Ms. Aftab to summarize her statement for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. You have to forgive me. I have laryngitis, which is perhaps a good thing for a lawyer to get. So, Madam Chairwoman, Chairman Thompson, Ranking Member, and other honored members of the committee, thank you very much for inviting me to speak here today. In addition to the credentials outlined by Chairwoman Harman, I am the executive director and founder of WiredSafety.org. We are the world's largest internet safety and help group. I have 13,000 volunteers in 76 countries around the world, and we deal with all aspects of internet privacy, crime, and security, especially in connection with children. What I have to offer today is very interesting because it's totally different from everyone else on the panel. I will be talking about how the radical groups and homegrown terrorism groups can spot vulnerable children and young adults. We teach our children to be careful about the information they share online. They're now all using MySpace and Facebook, Bebo, Pixo, tagged, innumerable sites like YouTube where they are sharing personal information and supplying it to others. In the same way that they're beating each other up in hallways and putting those things on YouTube, we have groups that are trying to make themselves look glamorous and to recruit young people who are looking for glamour. Many of our young people are looking for their 15 megabytes of fame. They want other people to look at their video, what they have to say. They want to have thousands of friends on MySpace. They want people to rank them as a site to go to. They want to be seen as influencers. They're looking for someone to listen. In doing this, they're able to broadcast their vulnerabilities. They are easy pickings for the groups that are looking for radical members, and they are recruited at different levels. Either they're recruited as manipulated innocents, people who have no idea that they're being manipulated, but are promoting sites and ideologies, ranking videos, and sending links across the internet. There are supporters that are sort of interested, but not really sure why, who will bring up the profile in the rankings on MySpace or YouTube by hitting it, ranking it, commenting on it in a productive way that will bring more traffic. There are influencers. A lot of influencers on the internet have a site that people watch. They are the people they turn to. They may not be the people they turn to in real life, but for whatever reason, they have the panache online that will attract others. If the radical groups can reach one of these influencers, even if the influencer doesn't buy in, isn't a member, they can influence millions upon millions of others who will go where they tell them to go online. There are sympathetic users, people who comment about how they're angry with the United States. A member of their family may have been in the armed forces and hurt. They are frustrated with politics, and they show themselves as potentially sympathetic recruits. There are vulnerable ones who may have been targeted and bullied. they may have felt threatened and they're looking for a safe place. There are target group members of a religious or an ethnic group that are the targets for recruiting for these organizations. And all of these things are being put on profiles for millions and millions of them online. And there are seekers. We've always found that the issue with young people and dangers online is a direct product of boredom versus unsupervised time plus bandwidth. So if they have a lot of connection and they're all connected on their cell phones, interactive gaming devices, and on the internet through Web 2.0 technologies to broadcast their beliefs and talk to each other, they are there. What do we need to do? We need to make sure that the internet industry, the social networks in particular, are working closely with the committee, the commission as you put it together. Wired Safety has worked within them for many years and is responsible for privacy settings on MySpace and other sites. We are creating a new center called Wired Trust that not only will advise the industry how to find dangerous content and people and movements on their networks, but to police them, to report them to law enforcement and to organizations that need to do something about it. And if they don't know how to do it, we'll do it for them. That will launch in the spring to make it easier. We'll train them how to do it, give them technologies to make it easier, and spot high traffic sites where you know there's something going on, whether it's child predators, sexual content, or radical groups, because there really are no different. We need to make sure that teachers and others understand the difference between truth and misinformation and hype, whether it's martinlutherking.org as really a hate site, or saying that the Holocaust never happened, or any of the other sites that make radicalization look like its core and will attract young people who are bored with technology and money in upper middle class neighborhoods, kids who never would have been exposed to this otherwise, who are not Muslims, who are not normally interested in radical groups, who see it as a way to become included, a way to become famous, a way to become in, a way to find a place to belong. And for that, Wired Safety and all of my 13,000 volunteers and myself offer any of our expertise and experience with dealing with this for 12 years now to this committee and subcommittee and your new commission, should you need that.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming in spite of your laryngitis. Mr. Weitzman, you're recognized for 5 minutes, and let me inform witnesses and members that we are expecting 4 votes very soon. We'll get through the testimony, and if the votes are called, then we'll recess as briefly as possible for those votes and come back. I hope that won't inconvenience the panel. Mr. Weitzman, please summarize your testimony for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, for inviting me to speak to you today on such an important topic. Let me begin by saying that we have been tracking the Simon Wiesenthal Center instances of internet extremism going back to the mid-1980s, when they began as offshoots of U.S. extremists such as Tom Metzger, Louis Beam, David Duke, etc., in the early bulletin board systems, and have subsequently expanded. One of the things that we have discovered is that some of the methods used by both our homegrown extremists as well as international extremists are the same. By trying to appeal to a closed group that is, create a closed environment, they help influence the process of radicalization, as has been described earlier. I am not going to continue by summing up the written testimony as much as I would like to demonstrate some of the things that we're talking about and the panel has discussed already. So we have a short PowerPoint that I'd like to bring into this as well and illustrate some of the things that, that we have talked about. So if it, okay, we can just keep going through all these at the beginning. Some of these are conspiracy theories that present a closed view of the world, such as blaming 9/11 as in part of an outside job or a job by outside groups such as the U.S. government, let's keep going, or Jews, etc. Some of these are pro-Iraqi insurgency videos. Some of them are media portals that people can enter into. The ones that you saw earlier with the flags on them, the U.S. flags, show that they were based on U.S. servers. These, as we keep going through, we can see that these are, again, from Al-Qaeda, but you see the cross of Christianity, the Star of David, etc., as the symbols being under attack. And this is just a chart that shows how to attack and break up the U.S. forces in Iraq. And if we keep going through there, we see that, as a matter of fact, that the CIA is even mentioned by name in it. And that's followed by a Taliban document website. I'm going a little faster than the thing there. That's okay. Keep going. Let's keep going through. A Taliban chart that deals with how to keep going. This is more than the same. Keep going through, Carrie.
While you're doing this, these are readily accessible.
These are
to
readily accessible.
our teenagers
Some of
and
them
young
are US
adults.
servers. There's actually nothing to stop them. And keep going through. I apologize for the delay. The Al-Qaeda principle of jihad, what they talked about electronic jihad, and talked about literally tracking American and Jewish and secular targets as well. There's an encyclopedia of jihad available online, shows you how to make a car bomb, and it continues as we go through cyanide bombs, you can see for yourselves, all the way through. Keep going. How to use cell phones as detonators. And this, again, this is translated into English, rules of making explosives, and how to be careful around the explosives and so on. There's a Taliban training manual that I mentioned earlier. And you can see, again, cell phones and other items, including RPG, rocket-propelled grenade launchers. And if we keep going through, we'll see, again, GPS systems being used. So these are really manuals of how to become a jihadist online. The Media Sword campaign is online. I just went to it last night and found items that told you exactly how to train to enter a non-Islamist music forum, for example, and to use that as a propaganda tool for getting your message across. Discussion groups based in the United States as well that bring these topics into anyone's home. And finally, if we go, these are some Latin American sites that use Iranian propaganda word for word, and also link to U.S. extremist sites. For example, a U.S. site that talks about exiling, has a poll about whether to exile blacks from every Western country, and claims 100,000 people have voted in favor of exiling blacks. That would be that site. And if we keep going through, coming to the next category are the category of online games, which are used to attract children. Some of these games are, for example, a game of New York Defender, which was originally Russian in origin. Then this is an anti-gay game where you have to kill the gay guy before a rape, or how to be a suicide bomber. Finally, Border Patrol. The object is to shoot as many illegal immigrants coming across. Now, obviously, the games target young people, helped inculcate a mindset in them, and to change that into a social policy, such as supporting stringent controls. And then finally, we end with a site that literally talks about bombing of soon will be the attack on Manhattan, dated September 2nd, 2007. So, I mean, I think, as I said, in some ways, the best way to have illustrated the problem, along with the written testimony, was these sites. In conclusion, if I could just mention a few very brief recommendations. First is that we have to be aware of the empowering effect of the internet on extremists. We must have researchers and responders who have both the technical and the linguistic skills to keep us informed and to be able to respond to what is online. We must make users aware of the misinformation and the techniques used by extremists. We must have increased cooperation internationally among the political, law enforcement, NGO, academic, and all other interested sectors. There must be the political will to legally act when necessary. We also must be prepared to invest in positive sites. So far, we've talked only about negative, but in positive sites that can present alternative narratives to that's being constructed by the Islamists. We at the Wiesenthal Center have made a start in that by creating a site called askmusa.org, which is an attempt to present in Arabic, Farsi, and other languages views on Jews and Judaism not related to the Middle East conflict in a direct and unmediated fashion. In many ways, we have ceded the internet to our enemies, and the result has been extremely harmful. However, even in a globalized world, there's no reason to believe that this condition is permanent. But we need to focus our efforts better and to invest more resources in the struggle. As the famous Holocaust survivor and the namesake of our center, Simon Wiesenthal, wrote in 1989, the combination of hatred and technology is the greatest threat facing mankind. How we face that threat might well define the world we will live in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that set of recommendations. Since the votes have not been called, I think we will now show the video prepared by Ms. Katz. Do you want to say anything about this before we tee it up, Ms. Katz? Okay. I think your microphone's not on. Could you say that again, please?
This is just a very small sample of what you get to see on a daily basis as an individual who joins any of these message boards, and it will...
Shocking
thank
and
you.
gruesome images circulate each day on the internet in a well-coordinated propaganda war against the United States and its allies. These sensationalized attacks are revered within the global jihadist community and successfully serve to convince others to join the jihadist cause. Jihadist use of the internet is one of the most vital battlegrounds in the war on terror, including the increasing trend of homegrown terrorism. The internet fuels the global jihadist movement, indoctrinating new recruits and facilitating the planning of terrorist attacks. One of the most common ways jihadists access information on the internet is through exclusive, password-protected online message boards. There are tens of thousands of members on these jihadist message boards, which are in a variety of languages, including Arabic, English, French, Turkish, Indonesian, and more. Potential sympathizers around the world can easily radicalize themselves through the copious propaganda distributed through these forums. Terrorist leaders and ideologues like Al-Qaeda's Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri constantly distribute compelling arguments to join the jihadist movement.
Found no relationship whatever between Iraq and the attack on 9/11. That just doesn't exist.
وسار الأمريكان والإنجليز وراء الكذاب وإمعته كالعميان إلى الهاوية. وسيقف بوش في الذكرى السادسة للغزوتين ليطالب الأمريكان بعدم سحب قواتهم من العراق وأفغانستان. ونصيحتي للأمريكان ألا يسألوه متى سيعود الجنود ولكن يسألوه كم سيعود من الجنود.
Furthermore, media production teams located all over the world prepare propaganda videos that demonize the United States and its allies, while at the same time boosting jihadist morale.
Bush, you thought you would be remembered by history as the president who waged a series of successful crusades against the Muslims. Instead, you will go down in history not only as the president who embroiled his nation in a series of unwinnable and bloody conflicts in the Islamic world, but as the president who sent the United States off on its death march towards breakdown and disintegration.
Once indoctrinated, online handlers recruit new jihadists to take the place of others who have been killed or captured in conflict areas like Iraq and Afghanistan. Alternatively, members who cannot travel abroad can simply utilize the information on the message boards to construct their own weapons and plan their own domestic terrorist attacks. The message boards provide perfect cover for those planning attacks who can use the online meeting places to communicate and to coordinate secretly without being detected by law enforcement. This widely distributed video demonstrates how to prepare a powerful suicide bomb vest, providing thorough, step-by-step instructions to create the vest, as well as how to position oneself while detonating the vest to cause the most casualties. In March 2004, Mohammed Zaki Amawi, a U.S. citizen, returned to Ohio after a failed attempt to enter Iraq to fight against U.S. and coalition forces. Undeterred, Amawi turned to the internet to gather jihadist training manuals and videos, including this one, to build his own local cell in Toledo. From propaganda to recruiting to planning and implementing terrorist attacks, groups and their supporters. Whether fighting American soldiers in Iraq or plotting domestic attacks, jihadists have increasingly turned to the internet to discover, develop, and share all the tools necessary to continue waging war against the United States and its allies.
Thank you very much. No votes have been called. Have they? No votes have been called, so we will begin the round of questions. And I will yield myself 5 minutes. We'll then go to Mr. Dent, out of order at Mr. Reichert's request. Well, why aren't they on here? We'll double check whether the votes have been called. At any rate, we'll start with the round of questions. I'd like to thank all of you for sharing your expertise with us, and note that each of you has brought a very unique point of view to this hearing. From Bruce, who has studied this question across the board, to Ms. Katz, who has done something incredibly unusual, which is to herself infiltrate some of these groups, to Ms. Aftar, who focuses on how to prevent all of our kids from getting caught up in this, and to Mr. Weitzman, who came forth with a series of constructive suggestions. Each of you has added enormously to our hearing record. I am just curious, as a parent, Ms. Aftar, I just would ask you, what are the chances, if there's a way to assess this, that any of our kids could get caught up in this?
Madam Chairwoman, the odds are higher than we thought, because, and I offer some of my teen experts to testify. They've testified before Congress before, to talk to you from their perspective. But so many of our young people are looking for a cause. So many of them feel isolated. And it's very easy, if they find this online, to be drawn into it. When I go to schools, I talk to 10,000 teens and preteens a month in person. When I go out there, I get questions all the time about certain misinformation sites, the MartinLutherKing.org site, where they come to me and tell me things about Martin Luther King that are not true, or question the Holocaust. If they're buying that and willing to talk to me about that, they're buying these other things as well. My last name, Aftab, is Middle Eastern. My father was from Iran, so I will sometimes get questions about that as well. Our children are vulnerable. They're connected and listening to people online more than they are to people offline. And I suspect we're going to be seeing even more of this as they move forward.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask one question of Ms. Katz, and then we'll call on Mr. Dent, because I know that he's on a tight time frame. Ms. Katz, thank you for that video. One of the people talking in your video was Adam Gadon, the young man I mentioned in my opening remarks, who was radicalized in Orange County, California, the son of Jewish parents who, as I understand it, was surfing the web, got to a mosque, and through that mosque gained the views and the instinct to commit violence, and now is in Pakistan as the I guess he would be the communications representative of Osama bin Laden. I mean, it's a pretty amazing story. Could you address him and others that you've seen, and just give us a little more color about what happens in these groups? You mentioned that becoming radicalized in this way is one of the most addictive, interactive, and informative experiences of the lives of these people. That's a truly scary statement.
It's very much that's the case, basically. You join any of these message boards and it fulfills all your needs. I mean, I've seen people get married through the message boards. And, you know, the people really never met, but you find what you were looking for. The case of Adam Gadon is really a case study. He was a teenager when he first went on the internet, a son of a Catholic and a Jewish from California, who went on the internet and was recruited, initially was converted because of what he saw on the internet. Eventually, handlers of Al-Qaeda made him join Al-Qaeda, and to me, he presents one of the dangerous elements that we are facing today as Americans in this society, using individuals like Adam Gaddan, who lived in this country, was part of this community, using his own life experience to describe how great it is to be part of Al-Qaeda. And listening to his messages, which are in English, and they are coming quite often. Just this year, we had about 3 messages from him, as you could see, with unbelievable quality, messages in English. Who is he speaking to? He's speaking to our American, or let's say English speakers. This is a new phenomenon, a new trend coming from Al-Qaeda. They don't need Arabic anymore. They want the English speakers along with the Arabic speakers. But Adam Gaddan's video is circulated everywhere on the internet. Not only this video, but every video he releases, they make sure that it makes it to YouTube and everywhere else that people can see. He speaks in English. He provides his own stories in his statements about his life in LA and how bad his life experience was until he found Al-Qaeda. Now, part of his messages are so using our own words, everything that the Americans are doing against us, basically explaining, you know, being with Al-Qaeda, we're not trying to kill you. All we're trying to do is to live at peace. It's you are the terrorist. You are trying to. And to me, as a teenager, and the bottom line is you see that a lot of the people we mentioned today were recruited to the internet or part of the internet are young, are very, very young. And it's easy to influence these people, especially when they see someone like Adam Gaddan.
Thank you very much. I now yield for a question to Mr. Dent. I would note for members that there are 4 votes on the floor, although this clock does not, for some reason, signal that. And following his question and the answer, we will adjourn for these 4 votes. It should take a maximum of half an hour and hopefully less. And I will return, and I hope other members will return for additional questions. Mr. Dent.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Real quickly, what can we do to go on the offensive? In other words, are we doing enough to create false websites and then try to track people who, extremists who would try to go onto those sites? Are we doing any of that? I mean, in other words, create some problems for them, that knowing if they go on these sites that they may not be authentic and maybe turn the internet into a less reliable source of information. Is there anything we're doing there that you're aware of?
I don't think a lot is being done. I don't think there is any straight policy, a structure of how you would like to see the internet within 10 years. Al-Qaeda has their own future plans. Now, when you come and you set up a message board, a fake message board to attract people, I know that other governments have done that, like Jordanians or the Saudis, Egyptians, in order to attract people, collect IP addresses, gather information. You know, when you are part of Al-Qaeda network, it's not that easy to cheat you, basically, and to send you to any of these message boards. In my testimony, I literally described how the online Al-Qaeda message boards are set. There's a very clear structure within the password Al-Qaeda messages that are called Al-Fajr Center. And you know when you go on these message boards that I showed, those are part of Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
Excuse me. There are easy ways to manipulate popular websites and profiles. And our government agencies are doing that in some respects, moving certain videos up in the ranking and lower in the ranking. We're also seeing a lot of other sites that are designed to make fun of these sites and bringing humor to it. You're seeing an awful lot of Arabic-centric humor that's designed to discredit some of this. Some of it, I suspect, is being done through governmental agencies. Some of it's done through talented teens who think it's funny. In addition, a lot of this information is tracked, and that information is held, even though it may not be accessed by the social networks. YouTube, MySpace, Facebook, all of them collect the IP address of every comment and everything posted on those sites and retain it for at least 3 months to turn over to law enforcement for valid subpoenas. So there's some of this, not enough. If we can let our young people know they're being manipulated and do more of that, I suspect we'll have fewer caught.
Thank you very much. The hearing will be in recess for these 4 votes. Thank you very much.